Welcome to Dating Deja Vu, the podcast where we talk about your patterns, your pitfalls, and your personal growth in modern dating. I'm your host, Christina Hathaway, marriage and family therapist and dating relationship expert. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about if your standards are too high and actually causing you to sabotage potential love relationships. So if your dating and love life looks a lot of bit of the same, it might be deja vu, but it also might be you. So let's figure it out together. What's up, Deja Crew? Welcome back to another episode of Dating Deja Vu. If you haven't already, make sure that you give us a follow wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure that notification bell is on so you know when we have another episode, and or watch me on YouTube as I have this beautiful space where I get to record. And thank you guys for the reviews. The more reviews, the better. And I hope that this is like little chunks of wonderful information about relationships that you can use. Also share. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. Share the shit out of this because the more people hear this, the better likely you are to find a partner who understands this shit. So you say you've got high standards, but no one will ever get close. Is that really a standard or is it a wall? We're going to unpack the patterns that keep us stuck, guarded, and wondering why love always is so hard, right? This episode is definitely for you if you are just really hyper independent and you feel pride in the standards that you're keeping. You find flaws in every potential partner within 3 dates. You've got that I don't need anyone. I'm an independent woman, but you're still lonely as hell and you mistake boundaries for avoidance and protection for isolation. So today we're asking the big question, are your standards keeping you safe or are they keeping you stuck? So I used to have a checklist of standards that I talked about here a while back where it was like if his belt didn't match his shoes, if he had dirty shoes, which honestly I feel like is a good indication of a person. You got to take care of your shoes unless you're wearing my little, what are these little slip-on shoes? But still, they look nice, right? But for me, I had all of these standards. However, I unfortunately am a part of the fixer-upper group that I just talked about in the last episode. So I actually would bypass those standards and end up meeting someone who didn't even meet those standards. However, there's a difference between having healthy standards and having emotional walls. So healthy standards is knowing your needs, your values, and your deal breakers, right? Emotional walls are rigid rules that protect you from vulnerability. It's not that your standards are too high. Of course, we want you to have standards. It's that fear is actually what's calling the shots, right? And so these standards can oftentimes be a disguise for your self-sabotage because you've been hurt in relationships, or maybe you've never really known what love truly feels like and it's very like fearful, or maybe love in your family felt very scary, maybe it was abusive, maybe it very painful, right? And so in an effort to not make yourself available, you create these very high standards. So some examples of these are, I only date people who make 6 figures, but haven't emotionally connected with anyone in years. This is from a client who is a boss-ass lady herself. She is she's an attorney, very like high praised attorney, and she wanted to get in a relationship with someone who was equally as successful as her, but she could not make any emotional connections. The next one is I won't tolerate any red flags, but you ghost at the first sign of discomfort. Now, again, there's a difference between your desires, right? There's a difference between your values and your deal breakers, but sometimes people will just get the ick over stupid shit, right? He choked on his salad, or he accidentally spit on me when he was talking, which if he does that all the time, I get that as a deal breaker, but people make mistakes. Your red flags are anything other than perfection. And you know that you don't like when people try to make you seem perfect or try to put you in this perfect little box, but you still do that for others. And again, this is to sabotage the relationship because what's underneath that is you not wanting to get too close. And another one is I'm just waiting for the right energy, but you cancel every date before it happens. I see this often where people will just already have a predisposition around what the relationship or the date, is going to look like, maybe based on their profile or a couple conversations. You can't decide how someone is going to act. You can't decide how you're going to feel about someone before you meet them. This is why dating is kind of so crazy, is like you're literally like interviewing someone for a few times before you're like, okay, like I'm feeling this. This is the right energy. Or maybe even the first date. Maybe it's not the right energy on the first date, but you're going to figure that out as long as we're not using those other two standards that we talked about. So where these come from, as I already talked about, is your origin story. These could be past betrayals, right? Abandonment from your early childhood. Maybe you had a parent leave. Maybe you have a parent that was emotionally not available to you. Maybe you had a parent who was addicted and, again, not available to you in many facets. Or maybe, again, you had a lot of chaos in relationships. So, betrayal is a big one. And I see, whether it was in high school or even in college, having this loving relationship, feeling like things are going great, and then learning that they have cheated on you. I'm going to talk about cheating in the next episode. And that is so heartbreaking. The problem with cheating, which I'm going to talk about, is oftentimes we make it about us and what we're not providing for that person and something that we're lacking, rather than understanding the underlying issues with someone who would cheat in a relationship. And that becomes a wound. That becomes an inner core wound. And that wound fucking hurts. And if you already had wounds like abandonment and other things, you're just going to assume that everyone's going to do that to you. So you're going to create really high standards so that that can never happen. But ultimately, it also keeps you from connecting to others. So the other thing is, we've learned that if I let someone in, I lose control, right? So again, if I have an addictive parent, if I let that parent in, their addiction is going to take over. I'm going to be very scared. It can be very painful for me. It can be very scary, for lack of another term. And I'm out of control of that situation. But if I act a certain way, right, then I can keep the addiction at bay. And if I keep the addiction at bay and or keep mommy happy, then I'm in control, right? But when it comes to relationships that we don't have any awareness around, we can't even manipulate that, right? Because we don't know them. And so if you start to get to know someone and start to let them in, that's really scary for you, because letting people in has been painful and abusive and hurtful in the past. And what we create out of that is walls, right? Where we don't need people, we don't want people. It creates this anti-dependence or uber independence, where you are very needless and wantless. All of these standards become walls. You don't want people, you don't need people, you're independent, you'll do it on your own. And the problem with that is if you truly want connection, you're saying, well, I'll date this person if they are blank, blank, and blank, right? Again, 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, whatever, the finance guy. That little unicorn doesn't normally exist. Oh, and he also has to be emotionally mature. Okay. That doesn't exist, but you're keeping it as a standard that, oh, I just haven't met the right person, when it's actually you, right? Here's the thing though, boundaries are actually rooted in self-respect. Having boundaries is very important, but it's only when they become extreme. Walls are rooted not in self-respect, they're rooted in self-protection, protecting yourself rather than respecting yourself. And respecting yourself means I allow myself to get uncomfortable and be vulnerable with the right people at the right time when I feel safe in doing that. Whereas walls say, no, absolutely not. You're not even going to do that, girl. You're crazy. We're not even going there. When we go there, we get hurt. So we're not going to do it at all. And one keeps you open, the other keeps you alone. So there's a cost, right, to these emotional walls. What the walls actually do is they block intimacy, even when you crave it. So again, intimacy, not to be confused with passion and romance. Into me, you see. They block you from being open, sharing your experience, letting people see the true you. Because again, if that was never accepted in my upbringing, then why would someone who is a potential love interest accept that in me as well? They also keep you analyzing instead of feeling. So it's almost like you're sitting there with this quality control checklist, right? Instead of listening, seeing how you feel when this person talks to you. Are they making eye contact? Are you getting excited? Are you getting getting a little bit like hesitant? Are you feeling like you can easily flow in the conversation? Are they interested in you? When you have this quality control checklist, you're checking out. You're not mindful. So you don't even know if you like the person because all you're doing is saying, I only like them if this and this and this is checked off. This then creates a cycle of loneliness, resentment, because you keep staying stuck, you keep staying single, and eventual emotional shutdown where you don't even want to do it at all. I know this for one of my best friends. There's times she's like, I don't even want to go on the dating apps anymore. Now, for her, unfortunately, she has had a lot of bad relationships, just men that weren't strong enough for her. Now, she doesn't have these like uber high standards. She even dated a guy who was shorter than her, which was hard for her, but she said, he makes me feel really great. He's very, responsible, this, and that. But for him, his standards were too fucking high. And he was like, oh, I date basically like petite blonde girls, and my friend is African American and thick and fucking gorgeous. So if there's anyone listening, she's single, she's a doctor. So anyway, they reinforce your belief that love isn't safe. You don't get to experience real love while living behind your emotional armor. And deep down, you already know this. You already know this. You're seeing all your friends get together with someone. You're like, why don't I have that? Well, you probably also are the one picking apart your friend's partner because, oh, well, he doesn't like drive a nice car, or like, what does he do for work? Oh, he didn't go to college. I have a client right now who's struggling with this. Her partner didn't go to college. He is financially successful. He is shorter, but he also buys her things that are nice, and they go, he's financially independent, but she's so afraid that her friends are going to be like, wait, what? He doesn't have a college degree. Wait, what? He's shorter than, he's not shorter than her. He's just shorter. And, when I talked to her and I asked her this past week, I said, what would happen if nobody else cared? And she goes, I would absolutely be with him. But it's not even her standards. It's the standards that she's afraid everyone else is going to set for her. And if she doesn't meet those, then she's not meeting her standards for everyone else, meaning like she's not good enough. And this is something she struggles with. So that's actually another thing that we should talk about is oftentimes people don't have the ability to make up their own minds because they've been too dependent. For this particular client, her parents told her what to do, how to dress, who to date, who to marry. And if she ever did anything outside of that, she would literally get letters from her parents of how they're disowning her. So she's very scared to not keep these standards because she's afraid of being disowned by the people who love her. Okay. How to tell the difference. Ask yourself, does this standard protect my peace or prevent connection? Okay. Next question. Am I setting this boundary for clarity or through fear? Do I feel grounded and self-honoring or avoidant and superior? So asking yourself these questions is really important. You want to say, okay, am I doing this out of fear? Am I setting this boundary? Am I saying this person isn't right for me out of fear? Or is it to protect yourself? Is it a, non-negotiable of yours, right? Is it that you're setting a boundary to get more understanding of them or to just kind of communicate better? Or are you saying absolutely not, no, shut it down, I'm done? Really start asking yourself these questions. And one step before that is recognize when these standards are talking versus you. So that might look like you starting to get the ick, you starting to pick them apart, which we talked about in self-sabotage. Recognize that that's happening and then ask yourself again, does the standard protect my peace or prevent connection? Am I setting this boundary from clarity or from fear? Do I feel grounded and self-honoring or avoidant and superior? So avoidant and superior is kind of like it sounds like I'm better than you. You can never possibly be with me. Newsflash, nobody is better than anyone else. We're all the same type of person. Everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses. And at the end of the day, we all average out to about the same. So there's that. Real boundaries feel like calm nose. It feels like you're connected to yourself and you can trust yourself. They're very clear communication. So you're not afraid to clear communication is much different than like demanding, right? Like you have to have this, you have to have that. And real boundaries are openness to love without self-abandonment. Walls are very controlling. They test people to see if they're good enough. Their avoidance masked as discernment, and their constant exits from vulnerability and intimacy. So, what do? Right? I'm always here to tell you what to do. So instead, let someone show up before you shut them down. I tell the story, I'm going to tell it again. My husband showed up pretty vanilla. He was, he's not a big explosive personality. He's pretty even kill kind of guy. I've dated the Rocky Roads when he was very vanilla. The Rocky Roads were very charismatic and kind of swaggy. That was a word back then. And they dressed well and they were very flashy. That didn't work out for me. And because I had done my work, I sat through the vanilla and then through the conversation instead of writing him off in my head. Because if I wrote him off in my head, I wouldn't have got to the place I got to. I learned, we enjoy the same type of music. And this little white boy from the country club loves him some Lil Wayne. I was like, okay, little white boy Mark, I want to hear more. And we ended up talking until literally we were the last people in the restaurant and the valet had to give us our keys. The second time we went out the next week, same thing happened. We sat in this kind of fireplace area. He had his arm around me. We were talking. It was so cute. Now I'm looking back at it. Oh, so cute. He kissed me for the first time. Even our first kiss was not like that, like, whoo, I'm getting all hot and bothered. It was kind of vanilla. And I was like, okay, now obviously we kiss better. So let someone show up for you. Slow the fear response. Use the pause before you protect. So again, understanding what that self-sabotage feels like as it's kind of coming up in your body, know that that's a protective part of you and say, look, self-sabotage or standards, I don't need your protection right now. I can stay here. I can pause. I can know if I'm safe or not. This person is not presenting to me like they're emotionally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive in this moment. And so I'm going to continue in this moment and practice relational risk. So what this is, vulnerability with discernment, not recklessness. So relational risk, slowly open yourself up, right? That's risk. But in order to be relational, we have to do that. So slowly open up that vulnerability and kind of take a step back, say, okay, I'm okay. Slowly open up a little more, take that step back. Okay, I'm okay, right? Instead of being completely reckless. And your mantra for today's episode is, I can protect my heart without caging it in. So if love feels like a fortress that you cannot escape or enter, let's be honest, it's protection that you're doing. And it's quite frankly isolating you and keeping you lonely. Your standards are valid, but if no one ever qualifies, maybe it's not them. It's your armor. So keep that in mind. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you could, please share this with someone who you're like, girl, this is you. You need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. As I said in the beginning, we love a follow. We love a subscribe. We love a notification bell. We love a review. We love you to share this. Come find me on TikTok, Dating Deja Vu Podcast. You'll also find us on Instagram and YouTube at the same handles. And I want to leave you with this same old nugget I leave you with every week. It might be deja vu, but it also might be you. Goodbye.